Hey everybody, welcome to Meals with Melissa, where we come up with some quality recipes that are healthy but not complicated, because I know y'all want a healthier lifestyle, but sometimes it's really difficult to come up with great ideas. So we come up with some great ones. I always try them out first, see what ones work, what ones don't work. We've had some fails, but today we're gonna make cauliflower tortillas. Now I got some feedback before I even did this that they tend to fall apart a little bit, and they do, but they're still a great vehicle to carry protein. And anytime that you can make something that sounds good, I don't know about you, but I love tacos. So, and they're so versatile. You can put any kind of protein on it. You can put pork, you can put chicken, you can put beef. Totally up to you, turkey burger, but that gives you some options. So we're gonna make this today, and I did play with this just a little bit because there are a couple tips that I do have for you, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. I already have one made so I can show you what it looks like. They're super simple and they're super fast. I'm gonna tell you the one secret, or the one big thing you have to focus on, is making sure that you get all of the moisture out of your cauliflower. So here's what we're gonna do. So I've already prepared some things, but the first thing you're gonna do is take about 3/4 of a head of cauliflower. I actually have made multiple small batches just to see if I can make it a little bit better and perfect it. But I am going to show you what I do with the cauliflower. You're going to trim it, cut it so that it fits in your food processor. I'm using my handy dandy Major Ninja mixer. I bought it a couple years ago for Christmas and find that we still use our small one more than the big one. But it works great. So I'm going to throw these in here. They're a little bit smaller pieces so that they actually fit. You want to make sure that you pulse it multiple times to make sure that it's going to come into a fine consistency, a lot like flour, yeah, right, ridiculous here. Rice, there we go. So I'm going to throw that in there. I'm going to throw the lid on and just pulse it until it's a really fine texture, a lot like cauliflower rice. So here we go. Super simple, right? One of the greatest things that I have found is I've been looking for a really great food processor for multiple years. I have a tiny one that works fine for some of my smaller recipes, but you know, I bought this great big Ninja and it really had nothing to do with it because it's really too big for most of our needs, but it does double as my food processor, so it works great. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that out, you're gonna put it in a microwave safe dish, okay? I'm just using like a smaller casserole dish. Throw it in there, and I'm gonna microwave it for 2 minutes, stir it up, microwave it for 2 more minutes, and then dump it out and squeeze the moisture out of it. So that's, like I said, probably the hardest part is making sure that you get the moisture out of it, because otherwise, as you add the egg and the other parts to the recipe, the ingredients, it just gets really hard to get it to bind together. So I actually used a thin dishcloth, mostly because I forgot to go and get a cheesecloth yesterday after I tried my first batch and wanted to make sure that it worked out. So I did already go ahead and microwave it and strain as much water out of it. It's still a little drier than I'd like it, or a little wetter than I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be a little bit drier. But for all intents and purposes today, just so that we can get it done, it's not too bad. If you're making a full batch, you're gonna use 2 whole eggs. Again, I'm making more of a half batch. I've already whipped my egg together. Put this in a different, smaller bowl. Okay, you know, whip that egg together, throw it in. To that, I'm going to add, the recipe calls for 1/4 cup cilantro. I'm using actually a lot less than that. Otherwise, the cilantro actually becomes a little bit overwhelming, too much of a flavor. And since I'm making a much smaller batch, I'm not even gonna use a tablespoon. Probably 2 tablespoons for a half batch, but I'm not even gonna do that. To that, I'm going to take, now again, full batch, I'm gonna take a full lime because I'm making a much smaller batch and I've already made multiple batches. I have about, just over 1/4 of lime left. I'm gonna zest that into my mixture and then squeeze the lime juice into it. It actually gives it a really kind of a fresh taste to it, which I really like. And again, you know, if you're adding some savory ingredients like taco meat, it's gonna be perfect for what you're trying to accomplish. So I'm gonna zest that. One of the fun tools I bought years ago thinking, maybe I could use that for something. It's come in handy. I'm gonna squeeze the juice out of my lime, and to that, I'm going to add my cauliflower rice that I made. It's gonna be kind of almost like a couscous consistency. Like I said, hopefully it's dry enough, but I'm also using a little bit less of the egg than it calls for. So put that into my mixture, mix it up really good. I'm also going to add a little bit of salt and pepper just to taste. Okay, mix that up really, really well. Now, I've already preheated my oven to 375 and used my favorite all-time baking tool, which is parchment paper, and lined my pan. See, even now this is me a little wetter consistency than I really would like it to be, but my last batch turned out pretty darn good, which I'll show you in just a sec. Okay, so I'm gonna take my pan, I'm gonna flatten these out into about 6 tortillas. I'm just gonna kind of eyeball it to where I'm trying to go with it. It is pretty wet, so I'm actually just gonna put it on my parchment paper and just push it out so that it's about the shape of a tortilla. You don't want it to be super thick or it won't bake through. And again, I'm trying to bake a little bit of the moisture out of it. Really the moisture now is coming from the egg, but looks like I'm gonna get maybe 3 out of this. Again, so they're not as pliable as a tortilla. You're not gonna be able to bend it like a tortilla. But again, depending on the type of healthy eating that you're doing, whether you are a little more low carb, this is really a way much better option. I had somebody the other day ask me what kind of tortilla I recommend if you're trying to eat a little bit healthier. And honestly, I just didn't have a good answer for that. These days there's a lot of good options out there coming out with people being a little bit healthier in mind. Things like, things made with other sorts of flours, things for people that are doing keto. So you should be able to find a good option, but just remember that anytime it's commercially made, it's going to have some additives and preservatives in it to make it last a little bit longer. And so technically it's going to be a processed food. It's going to be broken down a little more than if you make things from scratch. The benefit of making things from scratch is even if you're using flour and sugar and things like that, at least it's going to have less additives or preservatives. That doesn't necessarily mean it's healthier, but it's going to take you longer to make it and you won't eat it as often, right? Doesn't that sound about right? So I'm gonna throw these in the oven for 10 minutes and then I'm gonna flip them over and bake them for about 5 to 7 more minutes. That's it. Then you can either eat them directly or you can warm them up in a frying pan, just browning each side for a few minutes. So let me throw those in there and show you what it's going to look like. All right, now my family's already tasted these for me, so they've already told me that it actually works pretty good. Some of my family members like them more than others. One of the things about healthier eating is you are going to have to get used to some different flavors. Of course, anything that's ultra processed and highly palatable is going to really change your taste buds. And going back to a healthier eating, a lot of people tell me, well, I don't like vegetables. Well, start eating them and stop eating the processed food, because the healthier things will actually start to taste good. Your taste buds will change again as you get used to it. To me, I love fresh vegetables like green peppers, and I love baking things like Brussels sprouts. Amazing. And you can add all kinds of spices. Just because it's healthy doesn't mean that you can't have great flavor, right? So here's the one that I made just a few minutes ago, probably the best one that's turned out yet. It just looks like a tortilla. I cooled it. I can put any sort of ingredients on there. You could put a little bit of cheese if you wanted to. Again, it really depends on your macros and what works for you and what you're trying to accomplish. So I will post the recipe below. If you have any comments, if you've tried it, I know somebody told me earlier that theirs just fell apart. Now this one's not falling apart, so I think I did a pretty good job drying it out. But if you've had an experience with it, or if you have a better recipe, we want to know about it. I also love to get some great ideas from you, because that's where all of our best ideas come from. So have an incredible Sunday. That's Meals with Melissa, and until next week, stay healthy.